So, is home birth painful? The short answer is yes, it's very painful. It doesn't have to be. You can absolutely have a pain-free birth. I can attest to that fact. Hello lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here from my birthing video, my supernatural home birth, hi and welcome. This is a place where I hope that you will be encouraged, that you will find your joy in childbirth, that you will also be able to experience a supernatural childbirth as I have. It means so much to me that you chose to click on this video, and without further ado, let's get into the topic of today's video. If you are new to my channel because of that video, wow, thank you so much for choosing to subscribe. That means so much to me. I am so grateful for each and every one of you here. And today I want to talk a little bit about, is home birth painful? Because that is I feel like that's a common question that people ask. Like, can it be pain-free? Is it always painful? Is it as painful as a hospital birth? Now, I haven't had personally a hospital birth. All of my births have been home births, but I have had both experiences. I've had a pain-free home birth completely, and I've had an excruciating birth that was very, very painful. And then I've also had a third experience where I had a pain-free labor and a painful birth itself, like pushing the baby out. And that was my last experience. That was the last video that I put out about home birth. So let's get into a little bit of the background. Like, why did I decide to have a home birth, and when did I decide to do that? So when I was about 17 or 18 years old, I started looking into home birth. And the reason is because I had heard that if you gave birth in water, it was significantly less painful. Now, and I just thought that the concept was so cool, that you could stay at home, you could have your baby in the comfort of your own home and not have to worry about rushing out to the hospital or whatnot. So I made the decision that I wanted to have a home birth if I ever had children, which I expected that I would, that I wanted to have them at home. And it became a topic that I became very interested in very quickly, and I learned as much as I could about the topic as a teenager. And then once I got married, I told my husband, once we got pregnant, I told him, hey, I want to have a home birth. And he was not keen on the idea. He did not want me to have a baby at home. He thought I was crazy. And he basically was like, no, you're gonna have the baby at the hospital. And I was like, but this is my dream. Like, I've always wanted to have a baby at home. Or my baby's at home. And so that led to many conversations back and forth, and then I had a friend who recommended that we watch the documentary The Business of Being Born. And essentially that was the documentary that really opened both of our eyes to the reality of what a birth at home can be like versus what a hospital birth often is like. Now, this is not an ultimatum of everything is like this or everything is like that. It's kind of like gray. It's kind of gray, but for the most part it's mostly black and white with some gray areas, if that makes sense. So if you want to watch that, you can watch that. The documentary is available online to watch. But that's kind of like what led us down the journey of, okay, well, we're going to have a home birth then. But the idea of having a pain-free birth did not happen until I read the book Supernatural Childbirth by Mize. That is where I got the idea of having a pain-free birth and having a supernatural birth. Now, let me clarify. Supernatural birth does not mean pain-free birth or pain-free labor, childbirth experience, whatever you want to call it. It's not synonymous. Now, you can absolutely have a supernatural birth, but it can be painful, but there can be elements of your birth that are supernatural, and then you can have a supernatural birth where you have a completely pain-free birth. They do not mean the same thing. Now, the reason that I say this is because if you're believing for a supernatural birth, but you don't experience the pain-free part, that doesn't mean that your birth was not supernatural. Why do I say this? Okay, so with my first, I had her in about 6 hours of active labor. I was in and out of early labor, yes, but I was far more dilated than was normal for a first-time mom. I was like at a 4 for weeks before I had her. And that was kind of abnormal. It was either 3 or 4, you know, dilation wise. But the thing is, I had discovered this book while I was pregnant with Bethany, my firstborn, and I had started believing and confessing certain things over my body. But because I had never experienced childbirth before, there was an element of hesitation and wondering if it really would happen for me. And because of that, and because I told so many people that I was believing for a pain-free supernatural birth, everybody told me that I was crazy. And I worked in the medical field. I was a receptionist and translator, and all the nurses around me, like, I love them. We still talk to today. With some of them I kept the relationship, but all of them would tell me, no, you're crazy and you're gonna have pain in childbirth. And then I also had the question mark of, well, how am I gonna know if I'm in labor, if I'm going to have a pain-free childbirth? And I had never had a baby before, and so it led me down this journey. I even went on YouTube. I searched supernatural birth, and there was no videos. There was like one video maybe, but there was no like actual labor and childbirth shown with that video. It was just kind of like a lady talking about it. And so here we are many years later, about 4 years later, and I have now made that video, and the video of my birth, because I remember how much I wanted to see what a supernatural birth would look like before I had kids. And now I decided to do that, to have other young women who may be looking for the same thing be able to see my birth and realize that it is possible for them to have the same thing happen. Now that's where I got the idea for supernatural birth. Now with Bethany, I absolutely believed for it, but I did not get it in the manner that I was believing for. I did have a very short labor. It was only 6 hours, start to finish, with active labor, but I did tear a little bit, and I actually had a postpartum hemorrhage after I had her that started. We think that I retained a little bit of the placenta or the lining, and then 5 days after I had her, because I had kind of started to hemorrhage right after I had her, the bleeding stopped once I was administered a little bit of Pitocin, and then 5 days later I had a really, really bad postpartum hemorrhage. So regardless, her birth, I would consider it supernatural, but it wasn't to the full extent that it could have been. And the reason I say that is because it was an abnormally short labor. Now I know that can happen for many women, and I kind of hesitate to call it supernatural because comparing it to my other 2 births, it was so much more like a natural birth than a supernatural birth. Now supernatural birth, I got this question asked on one of my recent videos. What is a supernatural birth? And I'm gonna make a separate video about it to kind of go more in detail. But supernatural birth is essentially something that you believe for. It's not something that just normally happens for women. It's something that you definitely have to put your faith towards and confess that your body is going to do the things that you need it to do during labor. So, short answer to that question. Now, most women think that childbirth has to be painful because of a verse in the Bible. If you're religious or if you're Christian, and that is down to the very first chapters in Genesis, where it says that their pain would be increased in childbirth. Now, surprisingly, I just looked this up today, and the word for pain, that's sometimes translated as pain, that women would have pain in childbirth, and that men's would have to toil very hard to see an increase, to see a return on their labor. And then there was a curse also on the serpent. So there was 3 curses. There was one on the woman, one on the man, and one on the serpent. But the word for pain is the same word used for Adam's curse. Now, what is that word? It's actually sorrow. It is not pain. And the church has tried to make it say that it's pain, but it's not. It says your sorrow will be greatly increased in childbirth. Now, that doesn't mean the same thing as pain. Sorrow is the same word used for grief. Now, there is other verses that say that women, the barren woman, will give birth with shouts of joy in another part of the scripture in the New Testament. And so there is evidence and there are clues throughout scripture that show that women are redeemed from the curse of having pain in childbirth. So pain is considered to be under the curse of the law, and that's any kind of pain. But Galatians 3 talks about how we are redeemed from the curse of the law. So therefore, we're redeemed from the curse of childbirth being very, very painful and excruciating. And you can look more into that. There is definitely, I would recommend that you read the book by Mize, because it goes into more detail and more explanation about why we're redeemed from it as women. But it's something just like healing. You have to believe for it in order to receive it. It's just like salvation, where you have to believe on Jesus in order to be saved from your sins. It's not just something that happens. You have to believe for it yourself. Now, obviously, I'm a Christian, and I'm looking at this from a very biblical standpoint, but even if you're not a believer, you can look into these things as well and see how it is that it works. So let's talk a little bit about how your mindset can affect pain. So if you, for example, I've talked about this before on my channel, but if you are working out and you're lifting heavy weights and you tense your arm muscles are going to get extensively very tired very quickly. And the more you tense your muscle, the more it's going to hurt as time goes on and you're contracting that muscle, right? So in the same manner, if you feel fear or anxiety, or you're just apprehensive about something during labor, your body tenses up and you will literally feel the contractions become more and more painful. And I can attest that this is exactly what happened in my last birth, in my supernatural home birth. It was towards the end of labor, I got scared that I wasn't going to be able to give birth in the position that I wanted to. Now, it shouldn't have affected me, but because I had it in my mind that this is the way I wanted it to go, I had a really hard time relaxing after that. And because I got so apprehensive, and because I was also dealing with the effects of the castor oil, which you can look in my previous video that I made about why my birth was supernatural. I go into more detail about certain things that I'm talking about right now, but it was the fear that caused me to tense up, and then everything became way more painful instantly. You can see the shift right after my water broke. Now, the other thing to note is that the amniotic sac naturally provides that cushion for your muscles when you're contracting. It provides a little bit of cushion, and once the water is gone, or the water has been somewhat once your water breaks, that cushion is gone, and so things become a little bit more hard, like, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say that it immediately becomes painful. It's just that the contractions are a lot stronger after your water breaks. And so you can see in the video when my water broke supernaturally, because my husband commanded it to break because we needed it to at that point, because of the position of the baby and everything. And what certain things that my cervix was doing that it wasn't supposed to be doing. You can see right after that, that's when the intensity really picked up and amped up in my labor. And because I lost control of my thoughts for a little bit, that's why I experienced pain. And the reason I'm saying that that is why I experienced pain is because I had experienced that in my previous birth. My second born was a completely pain-free labor and completely pain-free birth. Now, pain-free does not mean that you don't experience intensity. Intensity can be there. Like when you're working out and you just you grunt, or you I don't know, make some kind of noise when you're pushing up a heavy weight, or trying to pull yourself up, on I don't know, in anything with working out, where you're making a lot of effort to get that weight off the ground or to hold it over your head for a certain amount of time, you're probably going to start to make some kind of noise because it is very intense and your muscles are working very hard. So showing some kind of vocalness in birth does not equate with you feeling pain. It's just that it is so intense that you have to vocalize it in some manner, like grunting, really low grunting or low moaning. That's often perceived as, oh, you're experiencing pain. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that you're experiencing intensity of the contraction. If you haven't been through birth before, you probably don't believe me on this, but that is kind of what happens. So the best way I can describe it to you is just kind of comparing it to working out. So something else that I want to add along with the mindset stuff and the spiritual stuff, because home birth, or birth in general absolutely is a spiritual thing as well, is some natural things that you can do to aid your body to have a pain-free birth. So lighting has a lot to do with the way that you experience your birth. Now this is really interesting, but I found out that fluorescent lights actually increase your fight or flight response within your body, and that dim lighting reduces that by a lot, or just regular incandescent lighting. Now what do they have in hospitals? Fluorescent lighting, which is unfortunate. But if you're in a constant flight or flight state when you're giving birth, you are not going to be able to have the capacity to calm yourself down and get into a relaxed state of mind. So I would suggest that you have dim lighting when you're giving birth. If you can use candles, that's like super nice, or if you can have little lamps that are not very, very bright, and then have your midwife have a flashlight so that she can see when she needs to, and that is like that's optimal conditions for a bedroom or for a bathroom wherever you're giving birth. The next thing that is like super helpful to relieving pain is combs. So you can have combs in your hand, and you basically hold them. I don't have one here, let me get something. Okay, so like if this is a comb like this, shaped like this, you're going to put the teeth of the comb in this part of your hand, and you're going to put the rest of the comb right here, and you're going to press down. So you basically want the teeth to hit right here, and you're going to hold the rest of it like this. And what this does is that when you press on it, you can basically hold it and press down, and you can put one in both hands when you're having a contraction, and it takes the pain away. It's really interesting how that works, because there's a pressure point right here in your hands. And then another thing that you can do is use warm water and warm compresses. So if you put the warm compress where you're feeling the most discomfort on your belly, that'll help a lot if you don't want to get in a bath. And you can also just sit in a warm bath and put your hands in there, because that also reduces pain. They actually call water births or sitting in the tub like the home epidural, because it is so effective at reducing pain. So towards the end, if it's getting a little bit too much to handle and you can't wrap your mind around getting calm, getting in the bath is like a really good thing that you can do, and holding those combs. Another thing is aromatherapy can help you calm down, which can in return calm yourself down for the contractions. You can use lavender oil to calm down. I had a little pendant thing that I used in my last birth, and I put jasmine oil in it. Now jasmine oil does relax your uterus, but it also makes the contractions more effective in order to birth the baby quicker. So it does make them a little bit more intense sometimes, but it also just helps the whole process be faster. It's not an oil that you want to use before you're in labor, because it can actually trigger labor. So it's definitely one to avoid during pregnancy for sure. And not use it until active labor has started. Something else that really relieves a lot of pressure and pain and discomfort is having somebody squeeze your hips. So basically your hip bone, where it sits on the front, you're going to go below that, and you're going to push in like right, kind of like where your hip dips would be if you have hip dips, and you squeeze right there on your hands and knees. You have the person behind you really squeeze in like this, and it actually helps open up your pelvis. It opens up the opening for childbirth to happen. I saw a demonstration on a mannequin once in a video, and it's very interesting, fascinating really, how it really does open up that area. And because it does, it relieves a lot of pain and a lot of pressure. So that's another thing that you can do practically, besides like the spiritual aspect. Something else I want to touch on really quick in this video is that if you do choose to have a home birth after watching this video, I would highly recommend that you do work with a professional, that you work with a midwife, to have the birth that you desire at home. Personally, I do not advocate for free birth, and obviously you're free to choose what you want to choose, but I'm just going to put a disclaimer out there. I don't advocate for free birth. Why? Even though my second birth was technically a free birth, it was unplanned to be that way, but my midwife did not make it on time. Fortunately, everything went very smoothly. It went very well, according to plan. And there were no complications with my second born. With my third born, had my midwife not been there, and had we had him alone, it would have been a drastically different result, I believe, because he really struggled to breathe. And things can go from good to not good in a split second, and you need to be able to have a professional person there with you and your husband in order to assess the situation and make a call, if need be, to go to the hospital and to transfer to the hospital. Now, most of the time that doesn't happen with home births. Usually home births go very smoothly, and intervention rate is very, very low. Like transfer rate is low, not intervention, but transfer rate is usually really low with home births, because you're not having all of these medicines put into your body, and then needing to do other things, and then interventions are required, and on and on and on and on, like as happens in the hospital. But with a home birth, sometimes things just don't go as planned, and I would really highly recommend that you have a midwife to attend your birth. But that's just me, that's just my opinion, and I wanted to put that disclaimer out there just so that you guys are aware and be as safe as possible. So that is kind of some things that I wanted to touch on in this video about, is home birth painful? It doesn't have to be. You can absolutely have a pain-free birth without using any kind of epidural or pain medication. So I hope that this video was encouraging to you, and that you have the birth that you desire, that you've dreamed of, and that you'll be able to believe for it, because I can't believe for you, but you can absolutely believe for yourself. And I am so excited for you. Thank you so much for being here again, and I will see you very soon in another video. I'm going to have a lot of different videos regarding birth, leading up to that, different things you need to prepare for. I have so many video ideas. I'm super excited for this journey this year and making more content for you guys. But if you wanted to stick around on my channel, I also have a lot of different motherhood type content and homemaking stuff and things that just have to do with our everyday lives. Okay guys, I will see you very soon in another video, and thanks for stopping by.
Sunrise in West Virginia, sleep talking on the front porch.